They called me a dropout, said I threw my future away. For 5 years, I was the invisible daughter, no photos, no praise. But today, I walked into their boardroom, not as their disappointment, but as Colonel Isabella Greene, the one person who could shut their project down with a single word. My name is Isabella Greene. I'm 30 years old, a colonel in the United States Space Force. Tomorrow morning, I'll be sitting across from my father and my younger brother in a high-level defense meeting at Nova Orbital Corporation, the very company they spent decades building. What they don't know is that I'm not there as a guest. I'm the Department of Defense liaison with final authority over their entire contract. 5 years ago, I walked out of that house for good, tired of being judged, dismissed, and told that military service was a waste of my potential. They never saw the medals, never read the articles, never returned my calls. But tomorrow, when they hear the words, Colonel Greene has the final word, everything will change. It had been 5 years since I last walked through that front door. 5 years of silence. 5 years of being talked about, but never to. Now here I was, Isabella Greene, 30 years old, colonel in the United States Space Force, pulling into my parents' driveway like some forgotten guest to a family gathering I was never truly invited to. The porch light flickered, casting shadows across the same cracked concrete steps and peeling blue paint. Some things never change, especially the feeling of being both unseen and judged the moment I stepped inside. Isabella? My mother's voice floated from the kitchen. She didn't come to greet me. "It's open!" she called. Of course it was. I pushed the door open. The smell was the same, cinnamon and old wood. The hallway was lined with family photos. Ryan's graduation, Ryan's wedding, Ryan holding his newborn son. No pictures of me, no uniform, not even the commissioning portrait I sent them years ago. The dining table was already set. My father sat at the head, swirling a glass of wine, and my mother busied herself with the roast. Ryan stood by the fireplace, gesturing animatedly as he talked about his latest leadership role at Nova Orbital Corp. They didn't see me right away, or maybe they did, and just chose not to acknowledge me. "Still bouncing around in the military, huh?" my father finally said, eyes barely glancing my way. "Still, flying or floating or whatever it is you do." A soft chuckle followed, from Ryan. I smiled politely. I didn't reply. Because tomorrow, in a high-security conference room overlooking the skyline of downtown Seattle, they wouldn't be calling me Isabella. They'd be calling me Colonel Greene, the official Pentagon liaison with the power to approve or terminate the very project Ryan was boasting about. Let them have their laughter tonight. Let them ignore me in my mother's kitchen, because tomorrow, the silence would belong to them. I still remember the look in my father's eyes the day I told him. Not fear, not confusion, just rage wrapped in disappointment. "I got accepted," I said, almost whispering. He smiled, thinking I meant Stanford, like we had always discussed. "Not Stanford," I added. "The U.S. Space Force, officer training. I start this summer." The room fell silent. "You're kidding," my mother said, eyes wide. Ryan laughed, actually laughed, like I'd told a bad joke. But my father didn't laugh. He stood up slowly. "The military? Isabella, the military is for people without real options." He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His words hit harder than any shout ever could. "You had everything lined up, Stanford, the MBA, a future at Nova Orbital, and you want to play soldier?" That was the last real conversation we had. After that, I became the one they didn't mention. No framed photo in the living room, no name on the Christmas newsletter, no extra seat at Ryan's wedding. I was the what could have been, the cautionary tale, the daughter who threw it all away. But while they were polishing Ryan's LinkedIn profile and throwing champagne at promotion parties, I was learning how to lead, how to command, how to build systems that protect the very future they bragged about. I deployed, I strategized, I was promoted again and again, until one day, at 30, I became a full colonel in the U.S. Space Force, with top-level security clearance and direct oversight of national defense initiatives. Did they notice? No. I sent my promotion announcement. No reply. I left voicemails. No callbacks. I forwarded articles featuring my work. Nothing. They weren't just absent. They were deliberate in their silence. But I didn't do it for applause. I did it because the military didn't just give me a title, it gave me clarity, discipline, power, and purpose. They called me a dropout, but the truth? I didn't fall behind. I just left their race altogether and charted a course of my own. The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early, military habit. The glass exterior of Nova Orbital Core gleamed in the Seattle morning sun, sharp and imposing, much like the people inside. But today, I was the one they'd never see coming. I stepped out of the black SUV in full dress uniform, midnight blue, perfectly pressed, insignia gleaming on each shoulder. As I walked through security, the guards straightened. "Good morning, Colonel Greene," one of them said, scanning my badge. He had no idea he was addressing the daughter of the CEO. But the rank? That he respected instantly. I was escorted through marble corridors and glass elevators until we reached the executive floor. Doors opened, I stepped out. And the first person I saw was Ryan. He was standing by the window holding a sleek tablet, rehearsing his presentation. He glanced up, expecting someone familiar. Instead, he froze. His eyes scanned the uniform, the badge, the ribbons. "Isabella? Why are you—" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "Colonel Greene?" a voice called from behind. Lorraine Hart, CEO of Nova Orbital, rounded the corner, extended her hand with a confident smile. "We're honored you're here in person. Everyone, for those who haven't met her, this is Colonel Isabella Greene, the Department of Defense liaison overseeing Project Aegis." Project Aegis, the same weapons initiative Ryan had bragged about last night, the project he believed he controlled. Gasps were quiet but unmistakable. My father stepped out of his office, flanked by two executives, mid-conversation, until he saw me. He stopped mid-step. His expression, confusion, recognition, and then realization. This wasn't a coincidence. I was here with purpose. We entered the boardroom together. A placard already waited at the head of the table, Seal Isabella Greene. As the room filled with directors, project leads, and engineers, one by one, they greeted me with the kind of composed formality reserved for those who hold the fate of contracts worth hundreds of millions. I let them settle. Then I stood, voice steady, eyes direct. "As liaison to the Department of Defense," I began, "I'll be reviewing your progress on the Aegis integration. I expect full transparency and technical clarity." No one interrupted. No one dared. In that moment, the daughter no one noticed became the only voice that mattered. The meeting began at exactly 0900. Lorraine Hart opened with a few remarks, then turned to me. "Colonel Greene will be leading today's session. Her oversight has been instrumental in shaping the future of Project Aegis." The room turned silent. I stood, calm, composed, commanding. "Let's begin," I said. "We'll start with a review of your current integration timeline and performance benchmarks." Every eye shifted to me, except two. My father stared at the table. Ryan stared at the floor. Department heads took turns presenting. They used big words, flashy slides, hopeful metrics. But when it was Ryan's turn, the air shifted. He rose slowly, holding his tablet with both hands like a shield. "As lead of the systems integration team," he began, "I've developed a revised implementation strategy for Phase 2. It leverages adaptive modeling and—" "Mr. Greene," I said evenly, cutting through the jargon, "could you clarify how your model accounts for the latency tolerances outlined in last month's DoD memo?" He blinked, froze. I'll have to revisit that portion," he muttered. "You'll need to," I replied, still neutral. "The benchmarks aren't negotiable. Please revise the protocol and resubmit by Thursday, 1700. A pause, tense, tangible. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Not a trace of sarcasm in his voice. That one exchange, short, surgical, landed deeper than any insult ever could. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't gloated. I had simply done my job. And for the first time, everyone in that room saw me not as someone's daughter or someone's sister, but as the authority. The weight of silence returned, but this time it was reverence, not avoidance. I moved on, briefing the next agenda item, commanding the room without dominance, only precision, focus, presence. Across the table, my father's eyes flicked up. He looked at me, not through me. There was no anger, no pride, just realization that I wasn't there to prove myself. I already had. Respect, I learned, is quiet when it's real. And on that day, I didn't ask for it. I became it. The meeting was over. People filed out quietly, murmuring their goodbyes, casting long looks in my direction, but none dared speak aloud what they all now knew. I stood alone at the head of the table for a moment longer, letting the silence settle. Then I turned, only to find my father waiting in the hallway, flanked by my mother and Ryan. "We need to talk," he said, his voice lower than I remembered, almost unsure. I nodded. "Your office?" He hesitated, then gestured down the hallway. We walked together, not as a family, but as people navigating a long overdue reckoning. Inside, the room felt heavy. My mother was already seated, hands tightly clasped in her lap. Ryan stood near the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. A familiar formation, my childhood jury. But this time, I wasn't on trial. I didn't sit. I stood at ease, hands behind my back, calm, unapologetic. "You've been a colonel for how long?" my father finally asked. 6 months. 6, he repeated, as if the words didn't compute. "And you didn't tell us?" "I did," I said evenly. "I sent the ceremony invitation, left voicemails, forwarded articles. No one replied." He opened his mouth, but my mother interrupted softly. "We didn't know what it meant. Colonel sounded important, but we didn't understand." I looked at them both. "Because I stopped trying to explain my worth." There was a long pause. "Every time I called," I continued, "you asked about Ryan's projects, quarterly numbers, your new clients. Never once asked what I was building or protecting." Ryan glanced down. "We thought you were stuck, moving base to base, following orders." "You said that last night," I replied, voice steady. "You laughed when you said it." He winced. "I didn't know you were doing this." "You never asked." My mother blinked quickly, her voice cracking. "I thought you were pushing us away." "No," I said. "I just stopped hoping you'd show up." Silence. Then, my father exhaled. "You've done something I never understood. But maybe I should have tried. You built a world we weren't ready to see." I met his eyes. "I don't need applause, just respect. For my path, even if it's not the one you would have chosen." And for the first time in my life, they listened. 6 months later, my apartment in Washington, D.C. felt warmer than usual. The open concept space, once quiet and solitary, now echoed with clinking dishes, soft laughter, and a kind of peace I'd never associated with family before. Dinner was simple: roast chicken, red wine, and apple pie. But it wasn't the food that mattered, it was who was at the table. My father arrived first, holding a framed article from a national defense journal. "I figured you might want a copy," he said, handing it to me like it was something precious. It featured a photo of me in uniform, standing beside General Armstrong and Lorraine Hart, headlines reading, "The Strategic Mind Behind Project Aegis." "I've had it up in my office for a while now," he added, not quite meeting my eyes. I smiled. "Thanks, Dad, it means something." A few minutes later, my mother walked in, holding a warm pie dish in both hands. "Apple," she said, smiling nervously. "Still your favorite, right?" "It is." She glanced around the apartment, spotless, organized, medals and commendations displayed modestly between books and cyber defense journals. "I don't know how you keep it like this," she murmured. I almost joked, military habit, but decided against it. She was trying. That was enough. Ryan and his wife arrived last, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and the kind of casual ease that would have been impossible months ago. After dinner, while we stood in the kitchen with empty plates and warm tea, Ryan pulled me aside. "I implemented your protocol suggestion," he said. "The team resisted at first, but it works. Better than mine." "Did you tell them where it came from?" He grinned. "Eventually, after I let them think I was a genius, for about 5 minutes." I laughed. "As long as it's working." "It is, and so are you," he added. "I never said it, but you really have your life together." "No, you didn't," I replied. "But you're saying it now. That counts." Across the room, my father examined the medals on my bookshelf. His eyes paused on one in particular, the Cyber Defense Citation, awarded for preventing a foreign breach that could have crippled 2 federal networks. "I read about that," he said softly. "Didn't realize you were leading it." "I was." He didn't say more, he just nodded. Later, as we raised our glasses, my father said, "To Colonel Isabella Greene, who proved that your worth isn't found in following someone else's path, but in creating your own." And in that moment, I smiled. Not because they finally saw me, but because I never stopped seeing myself. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones least capable of seeing who we've become. They measure us by outdated blueprints, by dreams they drew without asking if we shared them. And when we choose differently, when we build a life not to impress but to align with our truth, they call it failure. But your value was never meant to be proven on someone else's terms. Like Isabella, you don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need revenge to rise. What you need is to keep going, to build, to lead, to live fully, even in silence. Because one day the room will fall quiet. And when they finally look up and see you, it won't be because you begged for recognition. It will be because you embodied it. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel like your path wasn't valid, keep walking. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that you were right all along. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we tell stories of transformation, truth, and the kind of power that doesn't need permission. Welcome to Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, where the quiet ones finally get to speak.